It was all day yesterday. Everybody you talk to. What are you doing for the eclipse? What are you? Are you for real? Let me tell you something. If you're so fascinated with the sun going away, every night it goes away. I mean, I get it. It's some event. You see the thing. People put their videos up. I mean, does no one have a job? There's people out in the street just looking up. Maybe I'm wrong. Steve Weiner here from GetRubix.com, and today we're going to look at a way to use Intune, AppLocker policies, some Entra stuff, some Azure services. We're going to look at a whole bunch of ways we can meld together a solution to get app utilization info from our Intune managed fleet. I mean, are these glasses look like something you get from, a bin at the dollar store? 3D glass. I mean, this is protective eyewear. This piece of paper and plastic stands between, your healthy eyeballs, your retinas, your corneas, and keep them from burning out of your head.
Get Rubix, solving for the modern workplace.
Those of us who use Intune to manage our Windows PCs, one question I get all the time is how can we tell what's going on with the devices with the applications? Okay, so one thing Intune is going to tell you is they're going to tell you on a PC what apps are installed, what's available. So you'll be able to see who has what. You're also going to be able to see how many instances are installed, right? Adobe installed on 6 devices, and that's all well and good. But the question I get asked all the time is how could you tell if these 6 devices are utilizing Adobe? What if this is an app that has a cost associated with it and you're trying to determine are people even using this? And Intune doesn't have that by default. So we need to be able to see how many times was an app launched across all my devices in the last hour, 3 days, 5 days. So whatever that time span is, knowing how many times it's being launched is an indication of, is this a used app? I can clearly see from this, okay, everyone's using Chrome. Sorry, Firefox, not seeing it. Okay, Adobe, that number, that's a little high. Or maybe I could say, wow, 18, I'm paying for 50 licenses of Adobe. Why is this not being, launched as much? Or whatever the situation it gives, it will give you an idea of what we're trying to go for. So how are we going to accomplish this? So in browsing the web and looking through some things, this was brought to my attention. Mr. Becker, I'm not going to butcher your name. So I'm not even going to put us all through that. But this was an interesting article. It's a little bit older, so some components changed. But this kind of went through how we can take basically AppLocker policy, which will count the launches, the exe launches of an application, and pipe that data to the Log Analytics workspace. Let's go through it together and see if we can get it going. Okay, so the first thing you're going to need is a subscription. So I'm using a pay-as-you-go subscription for Azure. I don't believe it's that much consumption, but obviously talk to someone who knows before doing this. First thing we're going to do is set up a Log Analytics workspace. And this is basically a place to pump logs out to. We've covered it in the past with certain things. Basically, this is a place that we're going to send our logs to, ultimately. So I'm going to create a Log Analytics workspace. This is where you're going to need that subscription. I don't have a resource group, so I'm going to just make one resource group. We're going to call this logs 001. Do not use my naming conventions. I suck at naming. This is going to be Intune logs. I can't have spaces. Okay. Go capitals. Okay, great. That's fine. I'm just going to create this to get it going. Okay, so our deployment's set. We can go to the resource. And basically, if you've never been in here, this is essentially just, this is where the logs will ultimately end up. And we'll talk about how to navigate them. There's not going to be a whole lot here at the moment. If we go back to agents, see here where it says want to set up the new Azure Monitor agent, go to data collection rules. Okay, so that's going to be our next step. What's a data collection rule? This is how we're going to tell the agent what logs we want to send up here to the workspace. So I'm going to call this my app usage. Nope. Rule name is app usage. That's fine. I'm using it for Windows data collection endpoint. I don't have one. Okay, so you can see right in the beginning here when we have download the client installer, let's go ahead and grab that. That's our Azure Monitor agent. So we're gonna wanna package that up soon. All right, so I'm gonna basically make a new folder. I'm gonna call it Azure Monitor. And I'm gonna put the agent in here, and I'm also adding the packaging tool. It's called the Azure Monitor agent. Client setup. Hopefully I spelled that right. I did. Great. And we should get a Win32 of that monitoring agent. And we don't need to do anything special here. So we're going to go to Apps, Windows. I'm going to hit Add. And I should be able to grab it here. Select App Package File. Going to go to the desktop. Azure Monitor. There it is. And it should be filled out because it's an MSI. Great, it is. Microsoft's the publisher. I don't need an image. I got my silent install, my uninstall. We're doing it as system. Let's do some basic requirements and my detection rules. I'm just going to go with their MSI for now and hope that that works. You're going to want to start with a group. Eventually you can blast this out to all devices. I'm going to use my M365 devices group and we'll get that going. Okay, so how are we going to deploy that AppLocker policy to our Windows devices through Intune? So there is a modern wizard way of doing it. If you check out the podcast I did with Craig, we had a whole thing on WDAC. In this case, we're going to do something a lot simpler so we don't have to go through all those steps. What we're going to do is we're going to do some local group policy. Okay, so once in here, you go to Windows settings, security settings, and then application control. And that's where your AppLocker policy is. So we want to specifically look for the executable rules. We're just going to create default rules. And this is going to throw these three there. Basically what these do is these look at anything from the programs files folder, anything from the Windows folder, and if it's a built-in admin, it's looking at all files, but we're just looking at for the standard users. So what we want to do is we want to create an enforcement rule, and we're going to export that. So configure rule enforcement. We want it to be audit only. Make sure it's configured, make sure it's audit only. Say it with me, audit only. You will break things if it's not audit only. I said what I said. With that done, we can hit OK. And we can export our policy. To the desktop, I'm going to write app usage. And you're going to get an XML file. And all three were exported there. You can delete these if you want when you're done. You don't have to keep them there. So you can see I got this app usage XML. I'm going to edit in Notepad++. And now we have a few different things. So we have AppX, DLL, EXE. What we want to do at the moment is we only want this rule collection element. So you see how Notepad++ highlights these two. We're just going to grab that. Perfect. And we're going to copy it. And just hang on to it for a minute. So let's go back to Intune. And we are going to make a new policy. Configuration profiles. And we're going to call this our EXE rules. So we're going to go to Windows 10, templates. This is going to be custom. So let's create, and these are going to be my EXE rules. Yep. Should have spelled that better. Okay. And you're going to add one row. We'll call it EXE rule collection for executable rules. Now the OMA URI I'll put below, but that is going to be /vendor Microsoft AppLocker application launch restrictions. Oh, we need to make this wider. That's really annoying. Launch restrictions. You're going to need a rule name, or a rule set name, I should say. rule set name, exe policy. So I'm gonna just make mine, I'm gonna call it app rules. Doesn't matter, you can call it anything. And that's gonna be my policy CSP. Now your data type is gonna be a string. It's not gonna be the whole XML file. So we're gonna paste, remember that thing we copied with the whole rule collection? That's gonna go right in here. And we're gonna save that and we're gonna deploy it to the same group we're deploying the monitored agent to. Because again, you don't wanna blast this out yet. So I'm gonna use my M365 devices to deploy that. Okay, so if we come back here to where we grabbed the agent from, we can now go to collect and deliver. We can add a data source. And we want Windows event logs. So we want custom, and we need to use the XPath query. Well, what's the XPath query? So you see right here is the log name that we ultimately need to have. Microsoft Windows, AppLocker, EXE, and DLL. So that's the path of the log. So we're going to add that. All right. And that's how we're going to know what we're doing. And then the destination is we're going to pick the log analytics workspace we just made. So there it is, Intune logs. But now we have to add a data source. Okay, so now our data source is here. We can review and create. Okay, so while the rule is in progress, there's another step we have to do. Let's take a quick inventory of where we're at. We have our log workspace. We have our collection rule, which is looking for the specific log we want. But what we have down here is we have all our Intune managed PCs with Azure Monitor Agent. Okay, so the data collection rule knows to take those logs and point them at the log workspace. Our Intune managed PCs now have the Monitor Agent, so our Intune managed PCs have the Monitor Agent. They also have the AppLocker rule that is set. So how are they going to get that up here? That is where the monitored object comes in. It basically represents everything in the Azure tenant that's transmitting data from the monitoring agent. That's going to go here, and the monitor object is going to send that data through. And this is going to be the flow. All right, so how are we going to create this monitored object? So I'm going to open PowerShell. We're going to use ICE so it's easier to kind of read here. All right, before you get started, you're going to need to make sure you have the following modules. Install module. Microsoft Graph. I should have it already, so it's there. The other one is going to be AZ resources, so that will, because we're working with Azure stuff here, AZ resources. I should have threw a force on that, but just make sure you have those installed before you get going here. So we need, and I'm going to post this in the, I'll post this in the GitHub so you have it. You're going to need the tenant ID. We're gonna need the, actually that should ID, keep it all camel case, subscription ID. We need the resource group. That's gonna be the name, and then we need the data collection rule name. Okay, if you don't know your tenant ID, you go to entra.microsoft.com. I'll walk us through this. Overview, and it should be sitting right there. Boom, that's our tenant ID. This is pretty much the same thing. You're going to go back to the Azure portal. We could just go home. And we're going to go to subscriptions and subscription ID. The resource group. Make sure it's the same resource group you're using for the data collection rule. So to be sure of that, you can go to your collection rule and just look at the resource group. It's RSG logs 001, just in case you have multiple resource groups, which you might have. And what's the name of our data collection rule? Well, we're already on it, so it should just be app usage. Great. Okay, so I want to connect my AZ account. Tenant is tenant ID. So now I'm going to be prompted to auth in. Here we go. Steve at stevecapacity.com. Get that MFA. Got to be secure. MFA is required to be secure. Everyone should have it. It's a great thing. Zero trust. I hate it in my labs. To me, it feels like I'm being asked for a key to use the bathroom in my house, but you need it. Okay, so we are connected. Okay, the next thing is we have to select the subscription. Select subscription, AZ subscription, and the subscription object is the subscription ID. We basically have to create a new role assignment for being able to post this. So it's going to be user equals get AZ AD user. AZ AD user. User principal name is going to be get AZ context dot account. Let's grab that. New AZ role assignment has a scope of that, right? Role definition name is owner, and the object ID is the user ID. Let's run with that. Okay, so if you run into this, okay, there's something, and this hit me the first time too. Okay, so in your entry portal, under overview, you're going to go to properties. You want to make sure that you can manage all Azure subscriptions and management groups in the tenant in order for this to work here. So this is something that tripped me up. So I'm going to hit save because that's how I'm authenticated in. If not, use a different service principal. But if you want to use your GA and, you know, when you're doing this, you turn that on. Okay, now we're good to go. Perfect. Okay, and finally we need an auth token. So we're going to say auth equals get AZ access token. So if we run that and then we call auth, that's our token. And we basically just have to parse that out. So to make a header, so let's do authentication header equals content type application JSON authorization is the bearer. This is similar to what we've done with the migration script, and that's the token. Okay, I'm gonna do that, and then if I call that authentication header, there we go. That's exactly what I'm gonna need. All right, moving on to the next part. We need to make a new GUID for this object. So new GUID is going to just equal the new GUID power. We'll just use that PowerShell command to make a new GUID. And let's just capture our user object ID in its own variable. Let's run this. And let's make sure we're good there. New GUID, good. User object ID, perfect. So we're actually going to create our own role definition for the monitored objects. That's going to have to be JSON. Body. Okay, so let's do this. Properties. Role definition ID, providers, Microsoft authorization, role definitions. Okay, I went ahead and pasted that part in because it's a specific GUID and not going to make you watch me type it. I don't think it's that interesting. Maybe it is. Principal ID is, of course, going to be our user object ID. Okay. And we'll just kind of break that apart there. And we need one more to close that, and I think we're good. Okay, now we construct the request using everything we created. PS, the request is https management.azure.com providers Microsoft.authorization role assignments, and we're going to put in the new GUID API version equals 2021-04-01 preview. Now that probably changed, but that's what's working for me now. So, okay, it turns out I was missing a space in the authentication header between. So yeah, see, it was bearer right into it. It's supposed to be bearer space. So let's try that again. Whoa, we did it. And it was authorization, not authentication. That was a hard one to type. Moving on. Now that we have the monitored object contributor role, we actually get to create the monitored object. So now we're going to do a new request, and that request is going to be https management.azure.com/providers/microsoft/insights/monitored objects tenant ID. API is version same one, 2021. Actually, not the same one. This is another known working preview. The body, actually, we can scrap that body because we don't need that anymore. And we will do properties, location, and the location should match the location in the object. East US should be the location, but obviously use your location when you're doing this. That would be East US. Okay, and we're going to do a respond this time. Invoke REST method. URI is request. Headers are authentication headers. The method is put. The body is body. And we're going to do this as verbose. All right, and now we just want the response.id. The respond ID equals respond.id. Okay, almost done. All we need now is to associate that collection rule to the monitored object. And we're going to do this by doing one more. I'm going to redo a request and a new body. So the request in this case is going to be https management.azure.com. The respond ID, providers, Microsoft, insights, data collection rules, associations, API version 2021. This is the same one as before. 01. We're going to get the body going, and that's going to be properties. We're going to do data collection rule ID. And that's going to be subscriptions. We have the subscription ID. Resource groups. We have the resource group. Providers, Microsoft.insights. Data collection rules. And we want our data collection rule name. I think that's going to be it. And finally, we are going to invoke that REST method. URI request headers, authentication header, method, put body is body. Let's run all that. Okay. So now the monitored object is linked to the collection rule and we are good to go. Okay, with those pieces in place, it takes some time for the policy to hit, the logs to start collecting, and the logs to start grabbing what they're supposed to do. So I'm going to take you over my other tenant where I set it up, a few days ago and kind of show you what it looks like when it's all good to go. Let's look at Intune and make sure everything deployed correctly. If we go to Windows, configuration profiles, the first thing we want to look for is our exe rules and make sure that's hitting devices, which it is. So good. That means they're going to have the policy, have that log in the event viewer, and they can collect what we need. We go to apps. We want to make sure the monitor agent is deployed correctly. So the Azure monitor agent, for the most part, looks good. I got some failures, most likely something I'm testing. So now if we go to our Intune logs and I go up here to the logs, you can see under log management, I have a few different things. I have event. Actually, heartbeat's pretty interesting. If you want to see if the agent is running, you could always just run the heartbeat and see that you're getting check-ins. And you can see here I'm getting check-ins from the Azure monitor agent, and you can see which computers. So everything's talking the way it should be. So that's good. But now as far as what we want to do, if I want to do event, okay, if I just want to run event, I can see the events coming in. And this is set for the last 24 hours. You can change this. So you can see, because I'm only piping in the AppLocker ones, that's what I'm getting. So it is working, but I would say to narrow this down, we want to do a few things. So we want to do event where, and this is KQL. If you don't know how to use KQL, there's some great information online how to do it. It's a query language, and I know enough to get around. Where the event, we're going to say where the event log is equal to Microsoft Windows AppLocker. Yep, AppLocker exe and DLL. And now this is very important, the username. We basically want to grab everything that does not contain NT, because that'll get rid of the system level stuff, so we can just see what apps our users are using. And lastly, we want the event ID to be equal to 8002, because again, remember 8002 is what runs on the machine. So let's do this, see if we got anything. We got quite a bit here. So it's still noisy. If we scroll over, we can see the render description, and I can see what was allowed to run. I don't really need all that. So what I'm actually going to look for is we're going to have to parse the event data. So in order to do that, we have to look at what's here. So this is the event data. So if we just look at one of these, let's see here. Okay, so really, if you look at all this stuff, there's a lot of information here, but really what I'm looking for is I'm just looking for, what's running here. I just really want the app, and I want a full count of how many times it shows up in this list, because I'm just looking for app utilization. So in order to do this, we can extend the event data, parse, no, we want to parse the XML equals parse XML, and we want the event data. I want to extend the event detail, the event detail to be ev data item user data. So I'm basically drilling down through here to get what I want. So you can see, actually that should be ev data. I put event. You can see we're going and we're just kind of drilling down. So ev data, data item. We're going to keep going. We're going to get rule, user data, and then rule and file data. Yeah, see, we're just going to keep chipping our way down. User data, rule and file data. And then we're going to extend the parent name. And we're going to extract that. So we're going to kind of, so the parent name, just so you can see where we're getting that from. File path length. File path. Oop. So basically, once we get to the rule and file data, we're going to extract all these characters out. Okay, so for this next part, I'm basically running, basically chopping up the characters, to pulling out exactly what I want, which is information from the file path. And that's, you're going to see all the way down here. So this is the file path here. This is really what I want to capture. Okay, so that's what I'm pulling out and just kind of extracting certain characters from there. Finally, we're going to project the parent name. And we can summarize by count, and the count is by the parent name. So how many times it appears by the parent name, and then we'll sort by count. Let's run this. All right, this is what I wanted. So let's take a look. So Edge is clearly the most used app right here. Chrome is next with 64 hits. What else do we got? We have Explorer being used, obviously. Notepad++ is on the list. So this is great information, and this is across my whole tenant. OneDrive. So this is awesome here. Outlook showed up, and if we wanted to kind of go bigger with this, we can do a chart, and you can even change the way your chart looks. So I like this stacked bar chart here. Okay, and what we can do here is we can do a top 10 by count. Now I'm only getting the top 10 most used apps. So now if I wanted to do a chart here, I can get that. I'm actually going to extend that to 20. And if I wanted to go back to my little stacked bar chart, there we go. So I can see from an app standpoint, well, where did Notepad++ show up on this list? Or did it? It didn't even make the top 10, right? So if you're looking for the most used apps, you know, obviously there's some here like Task Host that, you know, just kind of run. There's a lot of background stuff, so there's some room to grow with this. But, you know, obviously the longer you let this run, the better an idea you're going to have of what's going on in the environment, right? So as we can see here, Edge is my most used app. Chrome is next. Yeah, you can take this, you can export this data. If you're good with Power BI, you can do some other stuff, but we are now getting app usage data right out of Intune. Massive shout out again to Mr. Becker. Again, do not want to butcher your name, and the link to the original article will be down below. Really good information, a great idea to take the AppLocker policies, log analytics, and the Azure Monitor to kind of put this solution together where we could see real app usage. So something I got asked about, and now we have a pretty good answer for it. Let me know if you have any questions, hop in the Discord, and we'll be seeing you.